Hi, I'm Joe.
And I'm Dave.
And we're the hosts of the Chasing Tomorrow podcast, where we bring you stories that delve into the science and spirit behind intriguing people doing extraordinary things.
Today's Chasing Tomorrow podcast, episode 11, we have a speed demon with us. We've had a lot of ultramarathoners on our podcast. Last week we had Lazarus Lake, but this week we have Canada's fastest, or one of the fastest, 5K and 3 kilometer distance runners, Jessica O'Connell. Jessica O'Connell was at the 2016 Rio Olympics representing Canada, and was just in the brink of qualifying for the 2020 Tokyo Olympic Games when the coronavirus and the quarantine really hit all of us all over the world. But yeah, I am super stoked to talk to my good friend Jess O'Connell and find out how it's possible to run as fast as you can when it comes to a 5 kilometer or 3 kilometer race, what training looks like, and how things are during the quarantine at this time in Canada. So hey, Jess, welcome to the podcast.
Hey, thank you so much for having me. This is fun.
Awesome. So hey, how are things? I mean, you are training, but you're not racing like the rest of us right now. How are things in quarantine in Canada?
They're okay. We're lucky that we have a good amount of freedom. Like, we're able to go outside and exercise. Gyms are open, which I haven't been exploring too much, but I've amassed a really nice garage gym, so I can do most of my training from there. So there are options, and I'm just trying to be creative and do what I can do.
It's fun, just for our audience, if some of you are on the video, my backdrop is not a phony backdrop this time. I'm recording from a mobile location because hurricane came up the East Coast this past week and wiped out a lot of power lines. So we're becoming more resilient than ever and figuring out how to live. It was first, we sort of make a joke, first it was the pandemic, and then it was the social injustice. Then we had this economic collapse. Now we have hurricanes and power outages. The next is the locusts are coming. And after that, from outer space. And so maybe running is a good thing because it's one of those that no matter what, you can always go out and get a run in. It's just a pair of sneakers, right? Doesn't matter what's going on outside. So it's a good example. How's the training for you going, Jess?
It's also really important if you have to outrun locusts.
Yes.
So,
right. Yeah, it's all about
so
cardio.
it pays dividends.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah, the training's been okay. I had an Achilles injury in February, which seems like forever ago. So I actually took quite a bit of time off, and with the cancellation of literally everything, I took a way slower approach back to regular running because for the first time ever, I actually had time to heal and come back from my injury a little slower because I've had a lot of injuries before, but in my career, it's always been injury, very, very, very important event like Worlds or the Olympics or something huge weeks later. So I've always been rushed to get ready for whatever's next. So this time I really took a slower approach and tried to figure out why I was hurt. I did a lot of strength, a lot of investigation into, is there anything in my form or anything that I'm doing that would maybe contribute to my Achilles heel is my Achilles heel. So anything contributing to that constant just breakdown. So it's been a slower return than it would have been had I been gearing up for the Olympic trials, but hopefully this pays dividends next year because the time pressures are gone. So I don't know.
That's a good point. Yeah. And that's a good point, Jess, isn't it? Because, this quarantine has given us all pause. It's given us the gift of time. And yeah, you're able to explore, different avenues, take your time with treatment, with different, types of strength training. So walk us through that a little bit more. Like what does that look like over the last, let's call it 6 months, when it comes to your training? I mean, were you just running a lot less? Were you doing a lot more strength training, different dietary supplements? What were you doing, and how were you using that time best?
Well, when the quarantine started, I immediately hopped on Kijiji and I was like, oh no, the gyms are disappearing. My training right now is exclusively through cross training, what am I going to do? So I sourced an elliptical for like the deal of the century and rented a U-Haul and got a bunch of friends, and we got this elliptical into my garage. So that was step one, because I wasn't running at all when things first closed. And then a friend lent me a bike trainer, so then I had options, which was great. So I've logged a lot of hours on the elliptical and the bike. I'm working with a strength coach, so we've really delved into how I'm doing movements. We noticed my ankles were horrendously collapsing when I was taking steps or jumping, which you couldn't really see in running videos. So I've worked a lot to strengthen my foot muscles and work on form a little bit. So those two things dominated most of the beginning of quarantine. And since then, I've like very, very, very slowly started adding running back in. So I'm up to about an hour a day of running. I'm doing some intensity, some tempo runs and stuff, but I'm still, I don't know, at maybe half or 2/3 of my volume of where my training would normally be, in much, much less intensity. But I think it's going to be okay if I'm able to then string together 11 or 12 months of training without a break for injury. Then I think that it's all worth it.
Yeah. I want to touch on that elliptical a bit. I'm sure that there are people listening in who would say, wow, you went to the Olympics and you use an elliptical? Like, well, like, can you really, isn't that like an easy thing to do? Like, tell us a little bit, how does that help your, your development and your training?
Oh, I love the elliptical, but I only like ellipticals if you can put the incline quite flat. So the Proctor machines are probably the best for that. So it becomes almost like cross-country skiing, not that bouncing around like gym, you can picture what I'm talking about, I'm sure.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
I like to wear a heart rate monitor when I cross-train, so I try and somewhat match my heart rate on the elliptical to what it would be running, and I can crank that really hard. The biggest problem I have with my elliptical is it doesn't have moving arms, and I'm finding that that's jamming up my hips a little bit because my legs are having to force themselves to move a little bit more than if I had arms offloading some of that force. So I have to be a bit moderate with the cross training. That's true of any cross training. You find like the golden bullet and then realize it's jacking something else up in your body. So moderation is key, is what I've learned.
Right. And so Jess, so like you're also a coach with Grid Coaching, and you have a number of running athletes.
Mm-hmm.
This cross training that you talk about, bringing the elliptical, I think that would surprise a lot of runners, that runners run and when they don't run, they want to run more. Do you implement a lot of this cross training? Getting in the bike, getting in the water, skiing, on the elliptical with a lot of your athletes when they're injured?
Definitely. I think that you can maintain fitness very, very well through cross training. And in my own career, I've been able to bounce back to like world-class times within weeks after months off cross training. So I've sort of figured out how to periodize that properly and how to break it up into a program that's like pretty effective. Of course, then I get injured again. Has been a lot of my career. So I almost think at times it's too effective. So I think implementing cross training is really dependent on what the goals of the athlete are. If they've got a really long-term injury, maybe not long-term, but a substantial injury with no races in sight, absolutely they'll cross-train a bit to keep the blood flowing and keep them like at a baseline fitness level. And that's sort of what I did through the initial stages of quarantine. But if you've got like some sort of race that's very, very soon that you're training towards, then yeah, you can cross-train very, very effectively and still have success in the race.
Maybe we could wind back a little bit. I always think, boy, there's probably nothing more exciting than to be in the Olympics. I mean, most of us have grown up watching the Olympics in awe of the athletes. As good as we are, it's sometimes just hard because your timing might not be perfect. It wasn't your year. It only happens every 4 years. Tell us a little bit about your journey to the Olympics. Like, when did you think about it? When did it become real? What was it like being there? It's really fun to hear about.
Yeah. When I was a little kid, I drew this picture and it had myself graduating from school, being the best Irish dancer in the world, because that's what I grew up doing, and also competing in the Olympics. I think sport to be determined, because I think it was a goal picture, and I think I was in grade 2 when I painted it. So it was always on the back burner, but truly that was like my wildest dreams sort of picture. Because I'd always thought that Olympians were superhumans. They were the coolest thing. I remember watching the Olympics in 1996 when Donovan Bailey won a gold medal in the 100, and he looked so excited. I was like, oh man, like that is living. Like that is just the coolest thing in the world. I was not a very athletic child. I failed swimming lessons like 3 times. I scored 1 goal in soccer. It was on my own team. Like that, like just useless. Like the kid picking dandelions during gym class. So I kind of put that dream on the back burner. I never thought it would happen until I started track and field more seriously, which was late for most athletes. I started training with the club in grade 11, so my junior year of high school. And I became quite quickly my years of dancing. I Irish danced my entire like grade school life, and it actually made me quite fit. So I became quickly. Like I was one of the quickest junior aged athletes in Canada right off the bat. So that sort of ignited the spark of like, oh, this could actually happen. I seem to be talented. Like, okay, cool. Like, hey, gym teacher, are you noticing? So that got the dream really flowing. And from there, I kind of stagnated it through university, because I had my first slew of injuries. I was hit by a car at one point. I was anemic because I lived with a vegetarian and I didn't know how to plan meals. Like just a slew of misfortune, I guess. And when I graduated, I was really no better than when I started university. I was a good high school aged athlete, and I ended a good high school aged athlete now in university or at the end of university. I wasn't good enough to pursue a professional running career or anything. But that summer I was backpacking through Europe, and I stopped in London first because that was where the Olympics were taking place. This was 2012. And I had tickets to the 5K, which is my event. And I remember watching the races happen, and I wasn't excited like I thought I would be because I was watching my event. I felt like extremely uncomfortable and kind of like sad and just misplaced, because I was minutes away from being fast enough to be in that race. But I just kept thinking like, oh, what happened? Like that maybe could have been me. I think it still could be. Like I did believe that I had the talent to be on that start line, and it hadn't happened for many reasons. But I was like, I think I'll do myself a disservice if I don't keep training and try and find out, could that be me in 4 years? So that's why I continued training, and that's what really got the dream flowing even more so, because I chose to commit myself to keep pursuing it. That was a really long answer to what got me into the Olympics.
No, but Jess, that was a really interesting answer that you end up giving, because on our podcast is called the Chasing Tomorrow podcast, and that's exactly what we're diving into is these elite athletes like yourself. There was a beginning. In the beginning, I would call that in grade 2 when you ended up. Do you still have that picture that you drew in grade 2?
I do. It's really cute.
Oh, that I would love to see that one day. I would definitely want to see that. But even when you're attending the London Olympics, as a spectator, that feeling that you have in your gut, and sorry, this interview is not about me, but it's like I've had that exact same feeling where I'm like, something's missing here. And then it starts this cascade of things that start rolling about, that end up making you a member of the 2016 Rio Olympic Games. And that's so cool. And maybe let's dive into that a little bit more, and a lot of those emotions you were having at the moment when you were at the London Olympics, and you were feeling like, okay, that should be me there. This is an experience that I want. My life isn't lived until I'm I'm there doing that. So maybe dive into that a little bit more. What are some of your thoughts and feelings about now those thoughts now looking back as an Olympian? Was that really the beginning of something great within you?
I think so. I mean, I think part of the precipitous moment was in the stands. The pump up music they were playing wasn't pump up music at all. It was that Florence and the Machine song, like "It's always darkest before the dawn." So I was like in the stands having this like emotional, like mind blowing moment. Like I need to keep training, and I hadn't discounted that I would keep training, but I was like, yeah, okay, I'm moving home, like after this trip. I think I'll jog occasionally while I'm backpacking through Europe, and I need to keep doing this. And after, like, I had graduated at that point, so I moved home back to Calgary, and I called up my high school coach again, because that's who I knew and trusted, and he developed other Olympians, and we started working together again. I was also doing a master's at the time in exercise physiology, so I was not fast enough to quit everything and get this fancy professional contract and just focus on running or anything like that. But I find that school or work and training go pretty well together, because you're resting from one while you're exercising your brain from doing the other.
Mm.
So I set up my life so that it was conducive to both. I could move ahead in school education and also hopefully move ahead in training. And I felt like I wanted to do that. Like that was a no-brainer to me. I definitely wanted to keep training at a high level, but I disagree with what you said, Dave, where you said that my life wouldn't be lived if I hadn't made the Olympics. And I know that was a metaphor or an exaggeration, but I did a lot of reflecting right before the games on like what would have happened, how would I felt if I hadn't made it, because as usual in my career, there was an injury right before, and it was sort of down to the wire, and not making the team was a very realistic possibility for me. And I don't know if I was just convincing myself of this, but I think that the journey and the pursuit of it was so fun and so rewarding and gave me so much joy that I probably wouldn't live my life as a bitter old woman for the next 60 years if I hadn't made the team, because I think that even if it hadn't worked out, and again, I'm coming from a pretty privileged place, but because it did, but I think that just the pursuit of this great big goal and the journey was so fun that even if it hadn't worked out, it would have been worth it.
No, absolutely, for sure. Yeah, and so these little triggers that end up happening along the way, it's so interesting to not only at the moment to pay attention to it, but later on to look back and wonder, okay, what triggered what at what time, and that's so cool.
Yeah, and I think, what we like to think a little bit about is that the journey has to be the joy, because we can't guarantee the outcome, but we can guarantee that we can enjoy the journey, because that's under our control. And if you don't like the journey, then sometimes then you're not sure, and maybe that's why we don't achieve the outcomes. Because you had 4 years that you had to, you had to wait 4 years before you got this, magical moment. So if you don't like it along the way, then what are you doing, right? And so when, during that 4-year period, did you keep the same energy level? Did it always was it there? Did it wane a little bit? Because it's not certainty that you'd make the team and get to Rio. How did that, play out for you?
I've always been really, really motivated to train. Like it's such an ingrained part of my life. So the energy has never waned, really. There were years where I had more success and years that I had less, mostly again due to injury. But through the injuries, I was perhaps more motivated than ever, because there was something new to work on that I had to figure out, and I had to figure out how to stay fit. Whereas in the years where it was really easy and everything clicked and flowed, it was a lot more fun, but it's just nice and easy. It's easy to stay motivated when you're having success. But I think that's a really good point that you made, Joe, is that you need to enjoy the journey. And I see that a lot in other athletes, is that if they hold the Olympics as this like incredible pedestal, and that's what they're gearing towards, and their life will not be complete if they don't make it, and they think that it will change their lives and give them absolute happiness, then these are the people who end up very, very frustrated because it doesn't. Like it's an amazing experience, and it's so fun, and it's so cool, and I'm so grateful that I've had it, but it hasn't justified my existence as an athlete. It hasn't changed my life in that now, from now on, everything is easy and I'm good to go. Like I've done it. This is great. I'm set, or anything like that. It's just a really, really cool thing to have happen. It doesn't make your life,
Right.
but it's a cool thing to do.
Yeah. You have at least another 60 years to go, so you better have a few more things to do between now and then, right?
Yeah, exactly.
Mm-hmm.
And so now you were getting ready for the Tokyo Olympics. You know, you hadn't qualified yet. And then this pandemic happens. How did that feel? Like, was it, really destabilizing, or it's like, all right, well, I've been through a lot and this is just more of that journey?
It was more the latter, honestly. And I was hurt, as I said. So it was maybe a bit of a blessing, because I hadn't discounted that I would make the team by any means, but I knew it was going to be a big, stressful push. It's not really how I wanted it to go. So it was initially a sigh of relief, like, okay, I have time. But I think that because I've been through quite a few injuries, I'm used to having the rug pulled under me, and I'm used to, like, I've got the coping skills for, okay, we're now on plan B or plan C or plan D, that's okay. Like, this is what we can do. What we can't do has been taken away. Like, this is how I move forward. And I also seen a lot of people, and in myself, that the first injury is by far the worst. And after that, you sort of develop these coping skills for things that are thrown at you. And I saw that too in a lot of my athlete friends, is those who had never really had something that they've gone through were a lot more destabilized than those who were like, okay, well, what's next?
Yeah, and that's what I really respect about you, Jess, as well too. Is you've I know you well enough to know that you've been injured more than most athletes, and your injuries have stemmed back to 2010. I mean, with your Achilles tendon. It's 2020. That's 10 years of injuries, and we were talking earlier about how your best results were kind of 2015, 2016, but really your results are pretty consistent since then. But there's injury, and then there's recovery, and there's injury and recovery, but upon every injury and recovery, I see a really great deal of coping mechanisms, and how you're able to adapt to that. And so, I think that what's beautiful about doing these interviews with people like you, Jess, is that you can end up giving a lot of your wisdom to the average runner or average athlete out there that's going through something, and that it's completely derailed. And I see it all the time as a massage therapist, and as just friends with other athletes, and I see them completely crumble. Give us some of your wisdom. How, has it gotten easier along the way? What are some of the coping mechanisms? Do you kind of sit back and go, well, that's the way it goes as an athlete? What are some of your strategies?
I think that it's important to realize that everyone goes through something, and it might not be an injury. Like, this was so eye-opening to me when I was at the games, was talking to other athletes. And I was like, oh, my journey was hard. I was in the pool a lot, blah, blah, blah. I'm so lucky to be here. And everyone I talked to was like, oh, yeah, it was kind of hard for me too. I have a stress fracture in my back right now. Like, oh, yeah, it was not the most ideal. I broke up with my boyfriend because I was too much of a head case the last 6 months. Oh, yeah, like I was named to the team last week because my federation's nuts and we have all these politics. Like, everyone had something, and it was so eye-opening to me that it was the people who could cope with what was thrown at them and had talent and had put it together and da. But the ability to be quite resilient was like a very strong distinguishing factor of people who had made the team, and probably in those who weren't there having these conversations with me. So I think that a few of the things that I always remind myself of is that everyone's going to go through something. So whatever you're dealing with is just your thing, but everyone's got something. So it's not like, oh, well, now the world is stacked against me. No, everyone's got their thing. That injuries are temporary and everyone heals eventually. So the way you are right now is not forever. And if your body is capable of running a gazillion miles and of all these things that you impose on it, and your body is so strong, of course it's going to heal. Of course, why would you be an exception? Everyone heals from an injury eventually. And just being really creative and hyper focusing on what you can do rather than focusing on what you're missing, because there is a lot. You can be really creative in your training or with how you spend your time, and it can be a very productive thing. So using that time for good, whether it's cross training or addressing other gaps that you don't get a chance to when you're training really hard, or even just spending your time on like mental wellness and doing some fun things that you would miss with racing, just making sure you come back as a more durable, whole, strong person.
Yeah, I love that, Jess. It's fantastic advice. I think one other perspective maybe you can give as a, you know, a very high-end athlete, you know, when you're running hard, you're starting to hurt, right? And then what you have to sometimes realize is that anyone else running next to you is also hurting. That it's not like, you know, oh, I'm hurting and no one else is, like at that level. And so even if you have someone who goes out and does a 5K for their first time or runs their first marathon and they start to suffer, we realize if you think about it that everyone else is, then there's some bit of solace that's not, you're not in a bad place. It's just that's what it takes to get there. I mean, what do you think about that much? And then as you do coaching, do you talk people through that that's just part of the journey?
Totally. I think that's an awesome point. It's easy to forget because when you're racing against someone, you can hear your own breathing really, really easily, but it's hard to hear your competitors. And so I'll often assume that they're just chugging along and everything's good. And that's a really good point, that no, everyone's hurting, because if you're not hurting, you're not running hard enough. And so the reward comes with a little bit of discomfort. And we do talk through, a lot of the athletes we coach a lot about, anticipate feeling like this at this point in a race, anticipate feeling like this. And if you don't, either dial it back if you're on the brink of death or pick it up, because you should be quite uncomfortable here. You still have time to make it up, but like now is where you absolutely have to push. And I know that in a lot of my own races where I've succeeded is when I've done a good job anticipating the discomfort that's going to come in a race. And so it's not a surprise. And races where I've really floundered, or workouts too. This happens a lot with a taper workout that's supposed to be really easy. And then I leave and I'm like, that was really hard. Like, oh my gosh, what happened? It's because I anticipate it to be really easy. I anticipate it to be a walk in the park. And when it's a little bit hard, I'm rattled. I wasn't expecting that. I thought that I would just float through this. And so I think the anticipation of pain or of discomfort is so, so, so important.
Well, yeah, and so Jess, I love that answer, but it brings me back to a conversation you and I were having probably a year or two ago about the Pan Am Games. And I remember watching on TV because you got second place, right?
Yeah.
And so, you know, this conversation you're probably having well, I know you were having in your own head, because you told me about it in the words that you told yourself. You're like, because I remember watching that final 400 meters as you and the woman who ended up winning were tearing away. And I was thinking, oh, she can't run any faster than the next, 100 meters, you're going even faster, and then the final stretch. And so I remember you saying something like, oh, don't blow my hammy right now. Don't blow my hammy. Don't blow my. And so those conversations you're having as well too, like in that moment, in that race, did you find yourself kind of going even faster and faster and having a new conversation in your head where like, oh, I don't know if this is going to hold up?
It was actually the opposite. Through the race, I remember we were at a pretty slow pace for the bulk of the race. And I remember it being still a little bit taxing. And I was like, you're fine, you're fine, you're fine, you're fine, is I think my self-talk. And then that final finishing kick, I was thinking, I'm going to blow a hammy. It was almost, like a like a self-depreciating joking sense. I was like, I'm going so fast that I'm like a sprinter. Woohoo! Is actually how I felt. So there was no fear there at all. It was just like
Yeah,
go 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 go.
absolutely. But I remember watching you in that race, and yeah, you were moving, and I was like, wow, she looks like a sprinter. And then I saw your face at the end, and I could almost see that whole oh my god, I can't believe I ran that fast, and my hamstring was going to blow. So I thought
Yeah,
that's pretty cute. That's pretty cute. It's funny the conversations that we have with ourselves in those moments.
it is. Yeah.
That's pretty awesome.
Yeah, there's some, lots of uh, interesting moves happening in racing, because we don't have the formal normal races. We got people going after FKTs. We talked to Corey Walton, who did the Ice Age FKT just recently, and he's a fast runner, but went out and did this. And now, this big marathon is going to come in the fall where, Bekele is going to run against Kipchoge, and just really pretty much a top athlete kind of thing. Are you involved in any sort of unique kinds of activities or events that are, happening because of the circumstances we're living in?
Not right now. I am still building my training up, and
Yeah.
maybe in the fall when I'm closer to being race ready, I'll look at that.
Yeah.
But they haven't overly appealed to me because where I live in Calgary is at altitude. So we would have to travel somewhere to do a true time trial where you're really, really fast. I might do a time trial or something like that at home just as a fitness check mark, but it won't be some epic, let's set a PB or anything like that, because it's just Calgary is not the place to run super, super, super fast.
There you go. But it's good to get training in there, right? And then when maybe you get down to sea level, it helps a little bit.
Exactly.
That's the idea.
And it takes the pressure off. Like I'm not someone who definitely needs a check mark or a benchmark all the time to make sure that I'm fit. If my workouts are clicking along and they're progressing week by week, then I'm content.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, so Jess, your mindset when it comes to injuries, and your mindset when it comes to, and hopefully I don't cross the line here by calling you old or anything, because you're 31 and you're a lot younger than Joe and myself. I'm turning 40 this year, and I can feel every month that I'm older, and I'm like, recovery, and it gets tougher. But I want to go back to your childhood as an Irish dancer, and as a very, it sounds like very competitive Irish dancer. And there, I want to, your parents, your influences, your coaches back then. Do you find that they had a very strong influence on you and on your mindset that ended up you yourself now as a 31-year-old, world-class 5,000 meter runner? Do you find that really had a strong influence on you as an athlete now?
It did, because it taught me what hard work is, and it made me into a bit of a workhorse. Because I remember at my first Irish dancing competition, my sister, so Irish dancing's in different age groups. So my sister was, I don't know, U6, and I was U9 or something like that. And she won so many medals that she couldn't even hold them all at her first competition. And I won one or two, and I was insanely jealous because she absolutely kicked my butt in her own age group. And I was like, this will never happen again. I am going to practice so hard that I will be the more winning sister next time. She was more talented. Like she was a lot more fluid than I was. I was like, I will outwork her, and this will not happen again. So I started practicing Irish dancing like a lot and a lot and a lot. And that stuck with me through my whole Irish dancing career. I practiced all the time, and I did become, at the time, a little better than her because she did not practice at all. She caught up later when I quit, but that sort of instilled work ethic, I think, and cause equals effect. If I work hard, I will see results. So I'm not one to skip off day runs or anything like that, because I can see that if I want something to happen, I have to make it happen. I'm the one who has to do that. I also competed in the World Irish Dancing Championships when I was 14 in the U14 age group. And that was my first international competition. And so when I had started running, I wanted to go to junior nationals in my first year. And my coach was like, oh, I don't think you're really ready. Like, you're too new to running. I don't think you're ready to handle this big competition. I was too young for junior nationals. Like, I was a youth aged athlete, so I would have 2 or 3 more chances to go. Like, that really wasn't necessary. But I was like, no, I can handle this. I can handle this. And my dad convinced my teacher that I probably could, because I was so used to Irish dancing competitions where you're in dresses that are basically revealing your underwear, and you've got a panel of judges that are judging your every move and writing subjective feedback on how your dances looked, and everyone's watching. And so I was very used to being being criticized, basically, like having to show up. And that's something I'd done since I was quite young. And so my coach was convinced that I could handle the pressures of a bigger race, because I'd been through something similar before. And that actually like really, really changed my track career, because I ended up placing third at this junior nationals a few months after I'd started training, which was the first time I actually realized that I was good at running, which I guess I would have had that realization later. But that was one of the coolest experiences I'd ever had. And I'll never, ever forget it, because it blew my expectations out of the water. And it was so cool.
Well, I always love asking those questions, Jess, because, and I'm certainly no Jess O'Connell. But, I think that a lot of, runners and a lot of, athletes in their 30s and 40s, whatever, go back to those flashbulb moments. And my flashbulb moment was when I was 6 years old, and my father put a mattress on one wall in our basement and a pitching mound on our other. And he would smoke cigarettes and drink beer on a sofa downstairs, and I would throw 100 to 200 pitches every day. And he ended up taking me to a baseball tournament, and we were the top pitcher in the province at a very young age. And he said, in 2 years, you're going to be better than him. And I remember that, triggering, and I would not throw 200 pitches, I'd throw 300 pitches. And so now I don't run, 70-kilometer training runs, I run 100-kilometer training runs. And so, it pays dividends year after year after year. And so that's so cool, Jess, that you had that same type of a flashbulb moment that still just triggers, work ethic as a 31-year-old woman.
I wonder if this is a link between crazy distance runners, because when I was an Irish dancer, I wanted to be a really good Irish dancer. And I noticed that the best Irish dancers had really big calves because they practiced so much. But I approached it from the other side. I was like, if I make myself have really big calves, I'll be able to dance better. And so as a 10-year-old, I took it upon myself to do 100 stair raises on one leg every single night before I went to bed for a whole summer. And now my calves look like watermelons, but it's the same thing. You pitched 300 times a night for I don't know how many years. I did a gazillion stair raises to try and make myself better. So you kind of become a student of the sport and figure out.
And I think so.
You just get so engrossed in it.
Well, the theme is sort of a little bit of just in general in life, just one more. And in that one more, we change the dynamic. I don't care what it is. If it's, read one book, then read two. If it's, walk 1 mile, then walk 2. It's in that extra where the biggest return will come. Because first, it's a mental breakthrough that we have to break through. We were sort of going to be done, but we're not. And then the second is, then we get the physical breakthrough or the learning breakthrough. And I do think there'd probably be a theme that would say that either someone, the mother or the father, said to you as you were growing up, you can do more, you can do more. And we're very influenced by that, and it works. Look, it worked for you guys for sure. I bet you thematically, Dave, if we asked the rest of our guests, they'd tell us the same thing.
I would think so. And I think it's that butterfly effect. And I guess, for all of our listeners who are parents out there, your kids are always listening, and bringing them to, creating opportunities for them to see excellence, the way that even Jess went to the not that your parents brought you to the London Olympics, but for you to see that, and that just triggers something further in you as an adult. But as a child, it's that butterfly effect of, okay, you see the cause and effect relationship back and forth, and it's a pretty cool thing. Just any other memories of your youth, of major rewards that you end up having, or defeat where you said, okay, I'm going to get up and I'm going to be taller tomorrow? Sorry, I'm putting you on the spot now. And only because I love where this conversation is going. This
I'm
is
thinking
good
back.
stuff.
I think it was important to me to run like grade school cross country. So we had cross country starting in grade 2, and it was very, very, very casual. But I would do these races and I would absolutely annihilate myself. Like I couldn't talk after because my throat was so raw. And every time I laughed, I'd start coughing, I remember. And they were always in the fall. And my dad would bring me out for a treat after. We'd go get ice cream, or we'd get a pumpkin at the store, something like that. And I always did them. And I had the same little cohort of friends who always did them with me all through school. And like I said before, I was not a very athletic kid. I'm still not very athletic in terms of skills or ball throwing or kicking or anything like that. But I could run decently, and I wasn't the best. It's not like I was blowing the field away in these grade 2, grade 3, grade 4 races by any means, but I could at least do it. And I think that was really important to touch on something that I was actually capable of and make it a very fun thing. Like my dad did a great job of it. It was never like, oh, why don't you beat this kid? Or like, that was so good, honey. Like you're average. That's great. But it was like, oh, good job. I can see you tried really, really hard. That's really good. I'm proud of you. Let's go get a pumpkin. So sport was a very positive thing, and it was fun, and it was enjoyable, and I liked to push myself because it was cool and it was this new feeling. So I think my parents did a really good job of supporting me and pushing me appropriately.
And I think it sounds, oh, go ahead, Joe.
Yeah, I was just saying, it sort of touches on a theme that I've been exploring a little bit, which people don't like the language, but I think it sort of works, which is that the lows can be the highs. That, on the journey, the high is sort of easy, but if you can take real pleasure out of that, working really hard, and you connected with something else positive, it can really get us through difficult times. It doesn't even mean a race. It's just in life in general. Mm-hmm. That, let's accept that it's not going to be this, idyllic storybook thing, that life is full of, some ups and downs. And if you can turn a low into a high, then imagine what a high would be like. Has that connected all with you, that idea?
Yeah, certainly through my injuries. Like this is transient. This is not forever. That is really important. And also experiencing those highs and knowing what they are, like they're unlike anything. There's no feeling like nailing a race or nailing a workout, or just you're just so happy. Like it feels so good. So I think what gets me through the lows is knowing what that feels like, and you don't really know until you've experienced it, but then chasing that again. When you
say, Jess, as well too, as a a world-class athlete, now into your 10th year of maybe even longer than that. Sorry, I'm just jumping back to your Achilles injuries. But is that you've experienced not two handfuls of lows, but probably far more than that. Do they get easier and easier to manage as you go along through your career?
Each one's different. Depends on the timing, depends on where I am in life, what else I've got going on, what's been thrown at me. So every single time it's like, okay, well, what's this going to be like? But I do think that they're maybe not easier, but I'm more equipped to deal with them. There's less of this emotional swing where every injury I get, there's sort of like the 10 steps of grief or whatever. I'm not sure what they are, but at first I'm in denial, and then I'm a little bit depressive, and then I'm in acceptance, and then I'm in like hyper focus. So it's like this pattern almost. And I think that those swings are less steep now. It's like now I anticipate that, okay, this is probably a thing, and I'm not believing it's a thing yet, but it probably is. So I should probably back off training. Okay, well, I'm probably going to be sad for a couple of days. That's fine, because the sadness probably won't linger much more than that. And if it does, then maybe I should look into that. And okay, now let's make an action plan. How do we move forward? So those, like the management piece, I'm way better at than I was when I was younger.
Yeah, and it sounds like all those learned those learnings as well too. You're transferring that over to your athletes as well too, and probably as well too. Your athletes are going through your running athletes are going through specific issues that you might end up taking on as a learned experience yourself by not even having to go through that injury or life loss or whatever that is. Do you find that that's the case with your coaching? Is that it's maybe even twofold? You get to have way more experiences and opportunities for growth
Mhm.
just as a coach yourself.
Totally. Like I love passing on my own experiences because I feel like, okay, well, if they can help someone, someone should benefit from this aside from just me. But so much more so when I'm talking to my athletes, it's quite inspirational hearing what they are willing to do to keep training. And I mean, from my training, I get to travel the world and go to races and stuff. And it's like from the outside, it's incredibly fulfilling, and from the inside too, of course. But many of the athletes I coach are weekend warriors, and they're training and exercising because it gives them just so much value in their lives. And I think that's so inspiring that they choose to do it because they want to. And of course that's me too, but I'm in, like, you could say I'm getting more out of it, I guess, because it's my job, right? Whereas
Hmm.
this is a hobby that they've chosen, and it's very, very fulfilling to them. And I think that's so inspirational. They're willing to work incredibly hard because they find fulfillment from it. And so when they get hurt, it's really interesting to see how they navigate that. And it's really rewarding to work through that with them and try and help them to reframe what they're thinking. And often when you give advice to someone, it's probably advice that you should be giving to yourself. And so hearing the words that I'm giving to other people, I will try and bounce back on myself. Don't panic, it's okay, like it's fine, like this is what we can do, let's focus on that. Or maybe this is actually a blessing, we can work on that thing. It's so easy to say that to someone else, and then sometimes those words bounce back to me, and I'm like, okay, yes, like now I believe it because I've just literally said this to this other injured athlete.
Yeah, it's sort of interesting because as we have more experiences, we won't even call it aging. Um, that either that familiarity that we get from circumstance allows us to behave, better into the future. But it's also really satisfying, at least as in what I hear in your voice as well, is this, wow, I'm glad I'm moving forward and not backwards, and even dealing with difficult situations, I learn how to do that better. And you just sort of make life better. In a sense, it's like our chasing tomorrow theme, right? It's sort of like, okay, we know that we live in the present, but there's, different futures we could create, and so what is it sort of that you're thinking about, over the next couple of years, as your career develops, as a runner, as a coach, what's your chasing tomorrow?
Well, I've been chasing these fast times for a really long time, and I still think they're in me. Like every year I fight myself back to this like level of fitness where I'm running some of the best workouts I ever have. And sometimes things click in a race and sometimes they don't. And at my level, it's not always just how fit you are. A lot of it's circumstance. So is the race rolling at a pace that you're looking for? Are the right people in it to push you? Is the weather exactly perfect? Whatnot, because I'm chasing seconds, not minutes. So there's still a few goals that I want to knock off time wise and team wise. I'd like to make the Olympics and stuff. And then professionally, I'm not really sure what lies for me after running. I'm my own career. I'm taking some coaching courses. I think I'd like to coach. I'm not sure at what level, like maybe the high school level or the club level. I want to continue growing my coaching business because it's really fun working with other people who I love sharing sport with other people because it's
Yeah,
just been so rewarding for me that I just love when other people get into it.
that's fun.
And I don't know what else is tomorrow. It's kind of exciting to me because my life's been so focused around running that like, well, what else is there? Let's see.
Well, isn't that the beauty of life right there, right?
Mm-hmm.
Uh, we I often like to tell people if I'm doing any coaching is, you don't need permission to live the life you want to live. And, don't wait on anyone to go after it. Just decide what you want and make it happen. And the more that we can encourage each other to that point, I think we end up with a stronger community and a stronger set of individuals all participating at the same time.
Mm-hmm.
Absolutely. And what I hear here, Jess, is that, you're a very curious mind, and you've got a lot of grit. You definitely put in the work and the effort, and you got a great mindset when it comes to bouncing back from injury and in the middle of a race and before a race and thereafter. So I think that tomorrow's got is a very bright future for you, and I could see something like the Tokyo 2021 Olympics, or whatever we want to call that now. The postponed Olympics is something that's definitely in your wheelhouse, and I'm going to be in the front row and being your number one fan.
Yeah, I'll have to be number 2 fan then if Dave's got number 1 slot. So hey,
I said it first. Yeah.
Thank you so much for being on the show. Wish you the best in both recovery and in training and getting ready for the Olympics. And let's have you back on and hear about how you knocked off a few more seconds off of some of these times.
Sounds good. Thank you so much for having me. This was a great conversation.
All right, Jess. Enjoy the rest of your day. Thanks.
Thank you.
Thanks, Jess.